I'm Emily Sigelski, the editorial director at Worth. And in this session, we're talking about food allergy research and the future of innovative solutions. As someone who suffers from a serious tree nut allergy, this topic hits close to home for me. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Amal Assa'ad of the Cincinnati Children's Hospital and Dr. Jonathan Spergel of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Both doctors are clinical network investigators for FARE, the world's leading non-governmental organization engaged in food allergy advocacy and the largest private funder of food allergy research. Dr. Assa'ad leads the FARE Biobank and Dr. Spergel leads the FARE Data Coordination Center. Thank you both so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Emily, for having us.
Yes, I would just say the same thing. So thank you, Emily, and thank you to everyone for letting us talk today.
Oh, we're very excited to have you both here. So let's jump right in. As Josh mentioned, it does seem like food allergies have become more and more prevalent in recent years. And I'm wondering why that is. Dr. Spergel, do you have any thoughts on that?
It's I was going to say the $1 million question, maybe the $1 billion question might be the right word. There's a couple big theories, but the honest answer is we don't know. I mean, we think it's a little.
Oh no, have we lost him? Dr. Spergel, I think we might have lost him.
Dr. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, now we can.
Okay. So it's probably loose to three things. The first one I would say is how we introduce foods. Mm-hmm. The second one probably is to what we call the hygiene hypothesis, why everything we're too clean these days.
Yeah, I can't finish Jonathan's words. He's my favorite allergist and food allergist. So I think he was going to say that the hygiene hypothesis, which is like we're too clean, so our body doesn't, and our immune system doesn't really know what to do other than, create allergies. And I think, I'm not sure what the third one he was going to say, but my third one would be that there's a bit of overdiagnosis. So, or maybe over testing. So sometimes children are tested before they even eat the food, mm-hmm. or patients are tested for a panel of things, and then they are diagnosed with an allergy to whatever is positive when that may not be the case. Jonathan, I try to finish your third.
So thank you. I combined my 2 and 3 into hygiene and sort of cooking, microwave. We prepare foods differently than what we've done before. Like, so you can think about our grandparents when there were very rare food allergies. I mean, food allergies go back thousands of years, but it was rare. We didn't microwave. We didn't use prepared foods. We used fresh foods. Foods are different now. And so that's a key thing. I don't think we completely understand why, but things are different.
You brought up an interesting point, Dr. Assa'ad, about how we're testing more people. I'm curious, in your opinion, does that mean that like a lot of people who are being diagnosed with food allergies might actually be able to eat certain things, but they just aren't eating them because they've been told not to?
Yeah, there is quite a bit of a percent of patients who have been diagnosed with the food allergy, as I say, even before eating it. Mm-hmm. And because of the availability of testing, this is what happens. Although we know about food allergy that a positive test doesn't always equal an allergy. Mm-hmm. But that's what happens. And some people, when we do the food challenges, which we're going to talk about, we find that out of every 10 people who we do a food challenge on, where we really test them, can they eat the food or not? Mm-hmm. There is 3 who have a reaction, and then 6 who may not have a reaction.
So I want to get into the food challenge But first, I'm curious, I was diagnosed with my food allergy when I was a young child, about 3.5 years old, on the playground at recess, playing with some nuts that had fallen off a tree. And my entire face swelled up, and my parents, the doctors, my parents took me to the doctors, the teachers freaked out. So I'm curious nowadays, with all this testing going on and different options for testing, what is the general way that a child is diagnosed with food allergies? When you go in to see an allergist, are they going to start with the oral food challenge, or how does that generally work? Is it different for everyone?
Um, so there is a good way. So in medicine, it should always start with a history, right? No matter where things are. It's what we've learned in medical school many years ago, and it hasn't changed. It's history, history, history. Then you test, and then you confirm. So it's always the history. So what happened? Um, did you did you eat the food and then you had a reaction? That's pretty clear. So if you eat a bag of mixed nuts, well, took nuts because Emily, you have nut allergy. Eat a bag of mixed nuts, eat many nuts. We don't know which one caused the allergic reaction. So that case, let's test for everything that you ate. And cashews, pistachios, and walnuts were positive, but we couldn't tell which one it was. Walnut was small and cashew pistachio was big. And then we would do that based on allergy testing, which can be skin test or blood test. And then you would do a food challenge after that to confirm which one was it. Oh, you can actually eat walnuts. It was cashew and pistachio that was the problem. And that's where things are. And this is some of the stuff that Amal and I are working on these days and to divine this database to really begin to figure out what is the best way to do it, because I don't think we have the answer yet.
Yeah, and that I think brings me a little bit to the faith challenge that you're both involved with. It is a multi-million-dollar competition designed to promote the development of an innovative and compassionate food allergy diagnosis that FAIR is doing. I'd love to kind of dive into that. So what are the biggest challenges or problems with the oral food challenge right now, and why are we looking for a new solution here?
So yeah, so the food challenge is a procedure that sounds sometimes a little bit crazy, that you bring someone like you when you had the reaction in the playground and say, hey, we're gonna try to confirm this, and so we're gonna feed you the food that you said you may have had a reaction to. And as I said, a third of people will actually have a reaction, and the reaction could be mild sometimes because the food challenge is done really in a safe way. I mean, the challenge is done in a clinic with monitoring and under protocols and so on, but that doesn't prevent a patient from having a reaction. So like these gray hairs are not COVID grays. They are all food challenge grays. Because, because you may end up with a reaction that is serious. The patient suffers because they've gone through an allergic reaction, and the physician also is not happy that they gave the patient that reaction. So it is a procedure that's been called the gold standard because, as we always say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. But at the same time, it is a risky procedure and it's a difficult procedure to go through.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Spergel, were you going to add?
Sure, something? I was just going to add food. I mean, my mind, the big challenge with food challenges, it's sort of funny to say that, is not really the risk. I mean, because luckily the risks are pretty manageable. I think places who are well established in this, which is part of the FAIR network, are well established in this. The risks are actually really small. I mean, you can do a food challenge very safely. We do. The people who are practicing allergists do many challenges, and the really rate of severe reactions do occur. I mean, they're not zero, but it's really small. So what's hard is that challenges, in my mind, with food challenges, the hard part is that they're time consuming and people don't want to do it, right? Because we're giving them the food, people are nervous. It takes hours to do it right. It's not something you do. You give a food and you don't go home and give someone a bag of, like, here, come in, I'm going to give you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You start off with a really small amount and you gradually increase over time to make sure that when they have the reaction, as mild as possible. So it's hours of procedures, and that's a long thing to do. And right now it's still, and I think this is, as luckily food allergy therapies are beginning to get developed, this is the gold standard for that. We can sort of say how sensitive you are. You can say you're this sensitive and not sensitive. So that sort of gives us a ballpark of whether therapy works or not. I mean, that's the important part about food challenges.
Yeah, we actually have a couple questions in, both about the role of the microbiome in terms of food allergies. Is that something either of you guys could weigh in on?
Sure, I'm happy to. I'll give my thoughts. I'll have Amal give thoughts, and if you ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 more thoughts. I think microbiome clearly plays a role, but exactly what it does and what is the right microbiome, I think, is really complex. And I think we don't know. I mean, we know microbiome is affected by what you eat and what you don't eat. So if you avoid a food, your microbiome is actually a little bit different than you eat the food. Your microbiome is affected by whether you have pets at home, whether you go to a school and your person sitting next to you have pets. So it's really complex of what the right thing is. And so we don't know what exactly the right microbiome is for people. It's really easy to do in mice. We can cure lots of mice by giving microbiomes, because you can put them in a culture where they have none, and then you give them one and you can change what they do. People are more complex. We have more microbiome than cells in our body. So it's a really complex thing. And I don't think, so there's something there, but I don't think we know that. We're not smart enough yet to know the answer. It's one of these massive big data problems that will need lots of data looking at what you're eating, when it is, because it gets fixed when you're pretty early on in life. So it's a very complex problem. I don't know if Amal wants to add anything.
Oh, yeah.
I agree with Jonathan. What we know is people who have allergies have a different microbiome than people who don't. So we know there is a difference, but cause and effect is still to be worked out. But there is also a lot of work that's being done to try and change the microbiome or influence it, depending on whether that gets done really early on in life or later after the allergies have been established, and see what the effect is. So there's a lot of clinical trials and basic research that's working on that particular part of the microbiome. It's a big, large world that lives within us, and we think it has an effect.
Well, in terms of the research and innovations that you guys are seeing, what seems to be like the most successful or most promising innovation in terms of food allergy diagnosis? Is there anything on your radar right now, or what's got you very excited?
So what got us very excited are two things that happened recently. One is showing that taking the food early on, for example, peanuts early on in children, in young babies, is able to prevent them from getting a food allergy to peanuts. So it's the prevention part, which was shown by the study that came to be known as the LEAP study, where the children who had the risk to become allergic to peanuts were given peanuts early on, but not just early on, but regularly and frequently, whereas another group was not. And after 5 years of follow-up, the group that was not given the peanuts early on had about 30% of them had peanut allergy, whereas the other group did not. So prevention is a new thing. The second part is a treatment. So there is an FDA-approved medication, immune spalfosia, has been approved by the FDA, and again, the idea is the same. You take a peanut allergic person, you give them peanuts, but extremely slowly and extremely small amounts, then you make them less allergic than they were at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Dr. Spergel? What's got you?
I mean, those are the two things that have been sort of shown right now, and one's obviously FDA approved, but there's lots of things sort of in the pipeline from various biologics. There's other ways to introduce allergens. I mean, there's the epicutaneous way, there is sublingual. So there's a bunch of things that other people are trying to modify the allergen, sort of changing. Amal was talking about peanut, changing peanuts slightly. So there's several things that are being developed, I think, that are promising, because I think when Amal and I think we started more or less the same time, we didn't know what to do. And now we have actually hope. There's some suggestions of things what we can do, right? There's some things that I used to tell people it's really nothing, but now I tell people there may be something that we can do to help you. And so, which is really promising. There's lots of clinical trials that we're involved in. I know Amal's involved in, that we can do. And part of the FAIR network is really beginning to promote those and really get those things up and going so we can give people hope.
I'm curious, how many of these trials and this research is happening with like adult food allergy sufferers?
Very little, unfortunately. There have been adult trials, but the adult trials have not been as successful as the pediatric trials. The pediatric trials are much more successful. The immune system seems more flexible and more mendable. When the younger you are, the better.
But some of the more risky trials that safety hasn't been established yet, they start in adults to prove safety. For example, trials of a peanut, what's called a peanut vaccine, start in adults to prove that they're safe, and then the age gradually goes down. But as Jonathan said, sometimes the adults are less, the immune system is less malleable and not very responsive to the treatments. So it seems like most treatments will have to be started early on. Even though we need to find something for the adults as well.
Yeah. One day, hopefully. We have another question in that I'd love to get to. What is the most important approach to disentangle the root cause of racial disparities in food allergies?
Yeah, I can take that one because we've been working on racial disparities in food allergy. First of all, acknowledge it. It has always been so that food allergy, because of the hygiene hypothesis and all of that, just affects affluent people and mostly white population. However, once we start digging deep, we find that food allergy affects even more percentages of African Americans, as well as Asians and Hispanics as well. So just knowledge is very important. The second thing is to disentangle the race from other socioeconomic factors, because that's very important as well. And then with race comes a lot of other things that would be the genetics, the genetic constitution of the individual. So we need to disentangle that from race. The other things are what we call covariates, where food allergy comes with asthma, with allergic rhinitis, with eczema, and we need to disentangle these from just the pure food allergy problem. Are they just allergic people, or are they definitely just allergic to food? And then, of course, which food? We have found a tremendous difference on which foods affect which race. And this is work that was published with people in Chicago and Northwestern, where we saw that African Americans, for example, have more fish allergy, and Hispanics have more milk and wheat and allergy than compared to the white population. We have yet to to talk about the Asian population, which we have found carry actually the largest burden of anxiety over food allergy.
Mhm.
I mean, I would just agree with, I would agree completely with what Amal said. There's a lot of things, there's differences in what food allergies are and different things. It's probably due to genetics, how people introduce foods. In some cultures, different foods introduced at different rates. So if you look around the world, food allergies are a little bit different around the world. I mean, typically milk is the most common one in everyone early on, because that's like the first thing that all little kids have. But it really varies. Peanuts are introduced in some cultures early on, same with fish in some cultures. Other food cultures, they do it much later. So a lot of what you're allergic to is what you eat and when you eat it. So that makes a big difference. And really beginning to pull that apart and pull apart what things are, because we're beginning to identify some genetic risk factors, and I don't think we know all the genetic risk factors for why one part is worth and more so than another part.
I think we might be running out of time, so I want to end on, I know 25 minutes flies by, but I want to end on a really kind of optimistic and future forward thinking question. For allergy sufferers, as well as their families, because obviously, you know, with children, I think this families are really impacted by this. What does the future look like for them 5, 10, 15 years down the road? What's the kind of hope and dream there?
We are very excited about the future in 5, 10, 15 years. There is so much knowledge that is accumulating. There is so much new technology. I mean, we've heard you speakers earlier talking about all these new technologies. There's so much of that is going to serve patients with food allergy, and that's what we expect to find. We also, there's so much biologics and other therapies that are coming down the pike. I think the problem for food allergy is the financial issue, the support. Food allergy has never been very highly supported by the NIH, for example. It now is a bit more than previously, but not as much as other disorders. So, so the financial aspect is very important, as well as the contribution of technology, all the amazing technologies we've heard about.
I would agree 100%. I think the word is hope. We didn't have hope before. We have hope now. And I speak both as a physician who treats food allergies and as a parent who has a kid with food allergies, and my mother-in-law had food allergies. So I live in that world as both a patient, a parent, a family member. So I do think it is really out there a lot. And I do think we have hope, which is something we'd never had before. So I'm very excited about that.
I want to add one more thing. Actually, FAIR has done a tremendous job of bringing in all the centers that work in food allergy together in a network. And then they've been very visionary in starting the biobank, which I was very lucky to be the person who's heading this effort, so that we can gather samples from patients who have food allergy and move the research forward. This has never been done before. And Jonathan, of course, heads the data coordinating center, where he is going to be collecting the data on all those patients. So just putting all this together, this mega data samples together, is going to quickly move the field forward. And we're very excited about all that.
This has been such a wonderful conversation and a very exciting talk, and a great optimistic way to end. Thank you guys both so much for being with us. There's so many more questions that we didn't get a chance to get to, but hopefully we can speak again soon. I think there's so much to really dig into here. So this has been great. Really appreciate it, you guys.
Thank you, Emily, and hope you do okay with your food allergies.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for having us.